Hello everyone and welcome to another video on this channel. If you're watching this at the time of its publication, it's right around New Year. In fact, it's just after New Year. So I just wanted to start by saying and wishing a very happy New Year to everyone. Looking forward to all that 2025 and beyond has in store for us, both the good and the challenging. But I hope that you're using this time to reflect on not just how, the past year has panned out, but really how your ultimate, how your whole journey thus far has panned out. I really wanted this video to be a bit of a reflection of the journey leading up to today, but more importantly, and where I'll be spending most of my time talking about, is where do we want to go from here? Now, it's no surprise that typically around this time, and maybe a little bit before this, many of us like to write down some New Year's resolutions, whether that's losing some weight, going to the gym more, pursuing a new hobby, maybe getting involved in a community, whatever it may be. Chances are many of us typically start the new year with these ideas of change. And a lot of the times, these ideas are well intentioned. We have a genuine and sincere interest to pursue them. But for whatever reason, they kind of fall through the cracks, most of them. And sometimes we lose motivation along the way. And so that's why I didn't want to spend time on this video focusing on the New Year's resolutions. Instead, I wanted to spend the time talking about more broadly what are the changes that we want to implement in our lives on a much deeper and a much grander scale. So, for example, how are we as a person? Are we happy with that? Is there room for development? And if you don't know the answer to that, the answer is always yes. There is definitely room for development, for growth. Now, how that development and growth ultimately manifests, that's unique to every individual. And that's something that unfortunately I can't shed a whole lot of light on, but hopefully it gets you thinking about maybe going a little bit below the surface, right? Yes, it's good to, be active and get on a diet and, meet new people. These are all great. And, by no means am I discouraging you from pursuing your resolutions. But hopefully, in addition to those more physical goals or those more, goals that pertain to our physical existence, hopefully you have goals and desires related to your spiritual existence, your true essence, your being, right? Because you always hear me say this often, and many of you know this quote already. We are not human beings living a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings living a human experience, living a human existence. So it's sometimes important to remember those two because in our autopilot driven life, we tend to kind of just all the days start to blend into one. And it's not until we have, a big milestone in our lives, such as a birthday, such as an anniversary, such as a death, or in this case, the beginning of a new year, the beginning of a new chapter, that we actually take some time to take stock of, how our life is ultimately panning out. So I hope this video serves as that initial spark, that initial change for you to go deeper and to use not only this year, but hopefully every year thereafter as a platform and as a springboard for discovering your true self, for connecting with God, for realizing your true purpose for living in this world. One of the things that I like to focus on when I think about starting a new year and starting a new chapter is change, right? Change is inevitable. In fact, life is all but, a series of changes, right? It's constantly changing. Nothing is constant. The only thing constant in life is God, right? Who is our compass, who is our North Star, who is our sort of grounding force that connects us to everything when everything else is moving. But unfortunately, many of us see change as something scary. We see it as something negative. We see it as something that disrupts, the happiness that we may have, or something that brings a lot of uncertainty, a lot of, you know, abstraction, and we're just not really sure how to make sense of it. It's a very frightening prospect. But I'm here to tell you that change is a beautiful thing in all forms, right? If we didn't change, we wouldn't grow. If we didn't change, we wouldn't develop. If we didn't change, we would not be able to overcome and grow from our adversities. So it is change that is the most beautiful agent of life. And the most wise among us know how to harness and flow with the change rather than resisting the change. Now, change, of course, can happen in a lot of different ways, but I like to bucket it into two different types of change. The first is the change that happens without any sort of influence or control on your behalf, right? Let's say a natural disaster happens and, unfortunately, you or your family is personally affected by that. There's not a whole lot you could have done to avoid that. You can certainly minimize the damage. You can certainly evacuate. You can harden your house. You can do all these things, gather supplies, etc. But it's not like you, hopefully not, willed into the universe, I want this tornado or I want this hurricane or wildfire to happen. Now, of course, that's a very unique case, right? It doesn't always happen. And certainly many of us, don't really experience that on a regular basis. But think about all the different kinds of change that happen to you unexpectedly. You weren't planning for it, you weren't wishing for it. It just happened and you had to adjust, right? Maybe your pet passed away and that was a difficult moment that you had to navigate and overcome. Maybe the person that you fell in love with moved away and they're no longer, near you and it's become difficult. Maybe you got an opportunity to move to a different city and you have to say goodbye to your current surroundings and your familiar surroundings. And, that brings, a degree of both fear and excitement. So there's a lot of types of change that can happen to us unexpectedly. And it's certainly important to be able to respond to that, to be open to that, to be nimble, and to kind of flow with the wind rather than being rigid like a rock. And I think this is something that, I've kind of touched on briefly and sporadically in some of my other videos about going with the flow and, letting go of the need to be in control. But I wanted to maybe just spend, a couple of moments talking about this before I get into the other type of change, which I think is perhaps even more important. One is being able to respond, right? One is being able to go with the flow and to just let life's journey naturally unfold, right? Even though we may have a tendency to try to be behind the steering wheel and control every single aspect, sometimes, or actually in many cases, most of the time, if we let life unfold in the way it's naturally supposed to, we will naturally achieve the things that we want. We will naturally experience the things we want, but we will do so in a much calmer, more balanced, more joyful, and more fulfilling way. It's when we try to force things that unfortunately a lot of the times things don't go the right way. Whether that's forcing a relationship, forcing a job, forcing any sort of big move or drastic change. Sometimes we have to kind of listen to our heart and listen to our intuition, even though our mind may be going 100 miles per minute and saying, I need to do this, and, I can't sleep until all of this is done. Sometimes the best thing is to just take a deep breath, trust that God knows exactly where we need to go, and follow that path. Listen to our voice. Listen to what is being shared because that is God, ultimately God speaking to us. It's not necessarily through the mind, it's something deeper. It's a feeling. It's a vibration that ultimately emerges and flows to the surface. But of course, if we're not prepared for that, if we're not ready for that, then we can't respond to that change. We can't respond to whatever God is instructing us at that moment. If we identify so much with the mind and the ego and our thoughts and our stories and our narratives and beliefs, well, then we've created very little room for God to operate. But that's why, you hear a lot about people talking about and practicing meditation and mindfulness and silence. Not because these activities or practices bring something in and of themselves, but rather they remove everything. They remove all that is not needed so that what is needed, which is soul, which is essence, which is God, can ultimately shine through. Right? It's when you meditate, it's not to acquire any sort of mental superpowers or mental fortitude, even though that may come as a result. It's really to notice what's going on within your being, what's going on in your mind, and to ultimately be able to distinguish between what is real and what is not real, to discover the ultimate truth rather than just believing what our mind has been telling us all these years. So it's important to not only respond to those changes, but also to open ourselves and empty ourselves in order to let God come through and guide us through those changes. God never gives us a change. He never gives us a struggle or a challenge without also giving us its solution. And even if that solution might not be apparent at that moment, that's part of the journey, right? There's no such thing as faith with a guarantee. Faith, by its very definition, means putting your trust in something or someone without knowing how it will pan out, right? That's why we have faith to begin with. So that's one type of change, right? I mentioned earlier that there was two types of change. One is the types of change that happen to you unexpectedly, and you have very little say over. Your only sort of say is what you can respond to and react to. But there's another type of change that is equally as important, if not more so. And that's the change that we actually take upon ourselves. A lot of this has to come with, what do we feel in that particular moment? We all have this drive. We all have this yearning for something more. Now, you might be listening. You might be, thinking to yourself, well, I don't really have that yearning. I'm just busy in my day-to-day life. I'm not really yearning more or whatnot. But in truth, we all have that yearning. We all have that thing that makes us question what else. And I'm not referring to, from a materialistic perspective of, oh, I have this house and I have this car. Now, what else can I get? It's more along the lines of what else is there to my existence? And some of us might not be able to tell that that's really what the universe or that's what God is trying to tell us, but that's really what's going on here. Because as we, and coming from my own experiences, having acquired many things, having acquired many statuses, many sort of accomplishments, on the face of this journey, I've also realized that there is an element of hollowness to it, and that my heart is yearning something more. And this isn't to say that I'm, ungrateful or I don't appreciate the blessings in my life or I don't appreciate the successes or the accomplishments. It's just to say that while those things are there and I acknowledge them, they don't really define me. They don't make up who I really am at the core. So then the question becomes, well, what does make me? What does constitute my core? And how do I go deeper into that? How do I connect with that? Right? That's where ultimately I always have this tinge, no matter how much life, bestows these blessings on me. I'm always grateful. I'm always appreciative. But at the end of the day, I realized that we all came to this world with nothing, and we all will leave this world with nothing. When they dig up our graves, it's not like we're going to be the Egyptians and they're going to throw all our jewelry and all our possessions with us, because at that point, it's pointless. We're just going to be alone, just like we came here. And so it's very important to sometimes remember that, not as some sort of a morbid reminder of our death, but really just the time here is finite, and we must use it wisely. We must continuously grow, continuously develop. I was reading a quote by Einstein the other day. It was a very beautiful quote. It went something like this, the moment you stop learning, you start dying. And I love that quote. I think it's so beautiful because, here you have someone who undoubtedly had one of the highest IQs and had one of the highest understandings of this physical world and the universe, saying that he still has room to grow. He still has room to develop. So apply that same principle to your own life, bringing it back to, this idea of a new year and a new change. What are the changes that you can bring to your life today? If it's helpful, I always believe a lot in the power of writing, because when you write something down, you are manifesting it into existence. It's not enough to just think about it. Yes, thinking is good, reflecting is good, but take some time to write it down. Write it down, journal it. Maybe go back a couple of days later, read it, reflect upon it. If there's someone in your life that you trust, you can share it and get their feedback. Or what I like to do sometimes is I'll just throw it into ChatGPT or another one of these AI models, and I'll kind of get their thoughts and their ideas and suggestions on how to actually, put the steps into motion to make that desire, to make that dream into actual reality. But it's important for us to first be aware of that and to appreciate that change happens in so many different ways. But sometimes we have to be the author of our change. Sometimes we have to be the one that actually, you know, gets behind the steering wheel and makes those changes. And, to use the expression, grab life by the horns. Because God has given us that opportunity. He has given us the mental faculties. He has given us, the bodily ability in many cases, but we have to then make the most out of it. We can't just sit on our hands and hope that, change will naturally come. We have to do that. We have to get out of our doorstep. That's what God ultimately wants us to do. Not so that we can ultimately arrive at some destination or achieve a material object, but more so to discover what is to be learned along that journey. Remember, it's not the destination, it's the journey itself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this, please drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos that can help you on your spiritual growth and development. As I said earlier, I want to wish you all a very happy new year, a year filled with success, growth, health, and ultimately change. And until next time, I really look forward to, having another video, speaking with you guys, and wish you the best in the weeks and days ahead. Thank you.